And now, ladies and gentlemen, the story of Christmas in America. I'm reading The Battle for Christmas by Stefan Nassenbaum, A Cultural History of America's Most Cherished Holiday. He's a Pulitzer Prize finalist. Newsday had to say about this book, captivating, entertaining, and erudite. Challenges and demolishes a variety of cherished assumptions. And we are on page 26. This is I forgot what reading this is. This is four or five. I'll figure it out here in a little bit when I title it. Um, and here we're going to be from 1730 to 1800. Christmas enters the cultural mainstream. A temperate Christmas. Now, as you recall, before this, Christmas was kind of wild. It was kind of like a Halloween Christmas, it was like almost like trick or treat, only at Christmas, and misrule they called it. And they would go in and they'd just not break in necessarily, but just walk into people's houses and demand food and demand wine or rum or whatever it might be. And hey, we're celebrating, and you have to serve me, and a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and a lot of fornication and adultery and all that was happening. And it was the pastors and the ministers were just losing their minds over all of that. Um, well, we're going to come to a different period of time now beginning in 1730. And let me start reading. Well, Christmas was becoming respectable too. Oh, what? Really? Even Orthodox congregationalists, I'm going to try it again. Even Orthodox congregationalists were beginning to concede that the observance of Christmas would be rendered less obnoxious if the holiday were celebrated with piety and moderation, purged of its seasonal excesses. The first New England clergyman to make such concession, at least implicitly, may have been Cotton Mather himself. In his 1712 anti-Christmas sermon, Mather paid only token attention to the purely theological arguments against the holiday, that it was man-made and not divinely ordained. I do now, I do not now dispute, Mather said, whether people do well to observe such a uninstituted festival at all or no. And he continued with a statement that shows how far he had moved from a position of strident Puritanism. Good men may love one another and may treat one another with a most candid charity, while he that regards a day regards it unto the Lord, and he that regards not the day also shows his regard unto the Lord in his not regarding of it. In other words, live and let live on the issue of observing Christmas. There was room for legitimate differences among people of goodwill. Wow, that's a big change in his position. What Mather went on to emphasize was the manner in which Christmas was commonly observed as a time of drunken revels and lasciviousness or lascivious behavior. That was a thing that there can be no doubt about. Cotton Mather's father, Incrus, would have readily agreed with his son's angry warning about the bad things that went on at Christmas, but he would never have gone along with Cotton Mather's idea that it was possible for good Christians to differ in candid charity about observing the holiday at all. For Increase Mather, as for other 17th century Puritans, the licentious fashion in which Christmas was commonly practiced was just an intrinsic expression of its non-Christian origin as a seasonal celebration. The holiday was riotous at its very core. For Cotton Mather, Writing a generation later, in the early 18th century, the essence of the holiday could be distinguished, at least in principle, from its historical origins and the ordinary manner of its celebration. From a modern perspective, the difference between Mather Pir and Mather Pils may seem trivial. The young man whom Cotton Mather addressed in 1712 may not have noticed the difference themselves, but it mattered nonetheless. Cotton Mather's concession, small as it was, left little room to contest the legitimacy of any movement that managed to purify Christmas of its seasonal excesses. And such a movement was not long in coming about. Hmm. Well, signs of change began to emerge in about 1730. Once again, some of the best evidence comes from almanacs. Yep. In 1733, James Franklin printed the following couplet on his almanac's December page. Now drink good liquor, but not so, that thou canst neither stand nor go. Of course, the most famous of all 18th century American almanac makers was James Franklin's younger brother, Benjamin. Raised in New England and trained as a printer by James, Benjamin Franklin became the century's preeminent exponent of moderation, sobriety, and self-control. In 1734, in the second number of his almanac, Poor Richard, Franklin applied the philosophy to the Christmas season. The December verse, written in the voice of poor Richard Saunders' wife, Bridget, chastised the husband who, quote, for sake of drink neglects his trade and spends each night in taverns till it's late. But on the same page, in an interlineation placed at the dates December 23rd to 29, Franklin made it clear enough in a rhymed but characteristically Franklin-esque piece of advice that he was no hater of Christmas. Quote, if you would have guessed merry with your cheer, be so yourself, or so at least appear. And similarly in 1739, oh, blessed season, loved by saints and sinners, for long devotions or for longer dinners. The emphasis on temperate mirth intensified in mid-century, when Nathaniel Ames, New England's most popular almanac maker, began to mix calls for charity and cheer with ambitions against excess. In 1752, Ames offered his first warning, bad times, dual drink, and clouded minds make heavy, listless, idle bodies. And in the 1760s, similar warnings came thick and fast. Ames' verse for December 1760 was a warning against getting drunk. His 1761 almanac included a similar piece of advice. The temperate man enjoys the most delight, for riot dulls and palls the appetite. And in 1763, the temperate man nor ever overfeeds his crammed desires with more than nature needs. In 1764, dietary strictures actually took over Ames' entire almanac, constituting the subject matter for the accompanying material in all 12 months of the year. What Benjamin Franklin and Nathaniel Ames were calling for was a Christmas that combined mirth and moderation. Both of these men were storekeepers, versatile, thrifty, and self-made. What they were trying to do was actually similar to what the Puritans had done a century earlier, to reconstruct people's work habits by having them do away with periodic binges. With periodic binges. But unlike the Puritans, their strategy did not entail the elimination of Christmas. Instead, they were spreading a new idea, that Christmas could be a time of cheer without also being a time of excess. All right. Christmas in the household of Martha Ballard, 1785 to 1811. The single best personal account of what such a moderate Christmas season may have been like can be found in the diary of Martha Ballard, the Maine midwife, whose social world has been painstakingly and brilliantly reconstructed by the historian Laurel Thatcher Ulrich for 26 years. Between the ages of 50 and 76, Martha Ballard recorded her daily activities as wife, mother, midwife, and resident of the Maine community of Hallowell. During the 26 years between 1785 and 1811, Ballard chose several times in her diary to name December 25 as Christmas. In 6 other years, she had reason to omit such a reference. She was occupied in delivering someone's baby. December 25 was just another working day for her. But Martha Ballard's diary also makes it clear that December 25 was just another working day in any case, even when she was not delivering babies, and even when she named the day as Christmas. In 1788, for example, Martha's husband, Ephraim, was away from home on business. Martha herself stayed home, finishing a pair of stockings for one of her daughters. In 1807, it is Christmas Day. She noted laconically, I have done a fortnight's wash. And on December 25, 1811, the final Christmas of her life, the 76-year-old woman reported similarly, I have done housework and knit some. The younger generation in Hallowell observed Christmas more actively than Martha Ballard herself did. In 1801, Martha reported nothing special for herself on December 25, but she wrote that her two unmarried children celebrated the day in the company of two members of the opposite sex. Ephraim and Patty kept Christmas at son Lambert's. His partner was Polly Farewell, and hers was Cyrus. Sure enough, a couple of years later, Ephraim Ballard Jr. and Polly Farewell got married. Some years earlier, two of the Ballards' young live-in servants likewise took Christmas as an opportunity for courtship. In December 23, 1794, Dolly and Sally went to a dance at Mr. Capen's, were attended by a Mr. Lambert and White. The previous day, they had prepared for this event by purchasing at the local shop a pair of shoes and other things. But Martha Ballard quickly reasserted her control over this frolicsome pair. On December Day itself, she reported, Dolly and Sally have washed second, skirt it's spelled in the way that she wrote it, so sometimes it's hard to read. Dolly and Sally have washed, scoured my putter, and washed the kitchen. Christmas may have been a time of work for Martha Ballard, but what is equally striking is how often that work involved the preparation of special meals for the season. It is on this very point that her diary is most revealing. On December 24, 1788, oh boy, quote, Daniel Bolton and his wife dined here. We made some mince pies. 3 years later, Ballard spent the entire week from December 21 to December 27, staying at the home of one Miss Lithgow, a young woman who was waiting to deliver her first baby, which would be born on Christmas Day itself. But on December 23, the pregnant woman and her midwife turned to the other task. I helped Miss Lithgow make cake and pies. On December 31st, 1802, New Year's Eve, Martha was at home and made pumpkin and apple pies. A year later, she recorded that her son Jonathan, together with his wife Sally and their 6 children, dined at their parents' house on pudding and roast spare ribs. Sounds pretty good, actually. Um, on 2 occasions, Martha Ballard actually went shopping for her New Year's dinner. And she recorded her purchases on such detail as to make it clear that she was planning to cook a special holiday meal. On December 31st, 1791, she shopped in 3 places and came home with what are unmistakably the ingredients for special cakes and pies, almost 10 pounds of sugar, 1 pound of raisins, a pound of ginger, 2 half mugs, and a pint and a half of rum. I would have to double up my workouts for a year to survive that one. All right, here we go. And in 1808, Ballard reported on December 28 that her husband went shopping for almost the same ingredients. Look, I love sweets, but I can't eat them, okay? Not good for my health. Mount Ballard went to the settlement, brought home um, a gallon molasses. Oh boy, half-gallon. Any room, half do ginger, fourth pound allspice, a bottle of Stolen's elixir. Ballard spent the next 2 days cooking with what were almost certainly these very items. I love the way she spells. I baked mince pies on December 29 and on December 30. I have baked mince and apple pies. On New Year's Day, she reported, sons Jonna, Ephraim, and wife Supt was with us at home. Children here. I'm just reading it the way she spelt it. It's funny. Children here. Um, we can probably assume that the family consumed at least part of what Ballard, she was then in her mid-70s, had spent the previous 2 days preparing for them. She sounds like a wonderful lady, but trying to read what she wrote is not easy. During Martha Ballard's old age, such feasts may have been occasions of reconciliation within this family. As Laurel Ulrich has shown, the Ballards had gone through a period of intergenerational alienation and conflict. You ever had that happen in your family? It appears that in the last 5 years of their mother's life, Martha's children began to bring her New Year's presents that invariably took the form of special food for the dinners in which they themselves partook. It was in 1807 that this ritual seems to have taken place. for the first time. Son, I'm going to show you how it's spelled. I'm sorry, EPHM. Anybody want to pronounce that one for me? I'm going to take my best guess. Son Ephraim made us a present of 12.5 pound beef. Son Town, Towwn, Town. Son Town, a present of a fine goose and 2 wings. They both sleep here. In other words, they stayed to eat. He interpreted it for us. They stayed to eat. A year later, the ritual was repeated, and this time Martha concluded her entry for the day with a clear expression of her own reaction. Here we go. January 1, 1808, son Lambert conducted his wife and Henry to see me. They made me a present of a loin of mutton, some sugar, butter, and bread. Son Ephraim's wife came here. Jonathan's wife also. She brought me 12 pumpkin pies. Oh, happy has this year begun, and so may it proceed. Oh, bless her heart. And I mean that in a good way. Uh, on at least one occasion during this period, Martha appears to have reciprocated. On December 23rd, 1808, she baked apple and squash pies and brown bread. I didn't know there was a squash pie. That's interesting. Brown bread. Okay. And sent a couple of the pies to one of her daughters, along with a steak of fresh pork. Pork is always tasty. What Martha Ballard's entries make strikingly clear is that for the Ballard family, the celebration of the Christmas season was deeply embedded in the normal rhythms of seasonal activity. In any traditional rural society, late December was ordinarily the time when animals were slaughtered, when there was food and drink aplenty, and, for men at least, the opportunity to relax after the hours of the harvest. Martha Ballard and her neighbors might very well have been baking mince pies at this time, even if there were no special holidays to mark the occasion. A supply of mince pies, if properly stored, would last through much of the winter. Even the presents of food that her children brought her after 1806 were part of a normal, ongoing exchange of goods and services that characterized life in communities of this sort. There was nothing about those presents that marked any real departure from the ordinary dynamics of life in Hallowell. Above all, the presents were not intrinsically commercial. The goose, beef, and mutton, the bread and butter, the pumpkin pies, these were nothing more than things that Hollywood families raised or produced in normal course of events. Only the special ingredients that went into making cakes and pies, the sugar, ginger, allspice, and rum, involved a commercial transaction. But this suggests that, but this suggests only that Martha Ballard's Hallowell community had links to the broader Atlantic world and was not some isolated backwater whose economy operated at a level of subsistence production. Do I have enough time? Probably not. No. The next section is going to be kind of long, so I don't want to go over 30 minutes. All right. And we'll on the bottom of page 30, we'll pick up on that in the next reading. Hope you're enjoying these little snippets about the history of Christmas in America. It's kind of fun and interesting. I'm looking forward to the rest of this book. And I'm glad you're along to share it with me. And I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season. I mean, we're coming up, see, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 5 days from Thanksgiving right now. So bless all of you. Bless your families. I hope everything's going well with everyone. Keep each other in prayer during this season, and find solace in all the joy of the Lord and the joy of your family gatherings. I'll have more later. Thanks for joining me here on the C Files. And if you don't like and subscribe, the ghost of Christmas future will come and visit you tonight.